All right, so I'm going to give a brief explanation for the new religion called Ascensionism. So the core principle of Ascensionism is elevatum, which is to ascend further and never stop. And this is purely metaphorical. To ascend means to go up the value hierarchy. To go up the value hierarchy is to pursue what is more valuable. And so there's no final resting place. So there's no such thing as um, an outcome that you can rest your laurels on. Everything needs to be transcended. Every category, every state of existence, the entire universe, reality, truth, everything needs to be transcended for greater magnificence. So the foundational idea, once again, elevatum. What it means. Life should be oriented upward rather than towards static comfort or final rest. Every achieved order is provisional, a rung, not a throne. The movement opposes stagnation and decline as fundamental enemies. So basically, every state of existence, every category, everything is just a rung on an infinite ladder. So if you're climbing a mountain and you're an ascensionist, then what you should do is keep climbing the mountain and never stop, right? And then after you finish climbing the mountain, then keep climbing higher. So like you probably need to climb up a lightning bolt, and then maybe you need to climb up a different galaxy. I don't know. You have to keep climbing, right? You can't stop. That's the point of ascensionism, is that okay, yeah, you can use something as a foundation for something greater, but you can't rest on your laurels, because that's stagnation. That's degeneration. So static heavens, finished utopias, and permanent status quos are suspects because they can become prisons of the spirit. The doctrine is built around continual surpassing rather than final completion. So this slideshow was made by ChatGPT, so it's a bit generic. But anyways, so these are the hierarchy of axioms of Ascensionism. So the core axiom, the most important one, is elevatum, the supreme principle. Endless ascent is the only indispensable commitment. Everything else may be sacrificed for it, but elevatum cannot be sacrificed. Causality is a secondary axiom. Reality is materially determined by cause and effect, with no ultimate free will. One can ascend only if prior causes are in favor of ascent. So I do believe in a deterministic universe, but I wouldn't say this is absolute because, well, I explained in my text, so I'm not going to go too deep here. So the third axiom is power. A lower but necessary tool. Power is the ability to successfully change reality, often described through reputation, connections, and ability. Yet power is not automatically more ascensionary. So power is important, but it's not as important as causality and elevatum. I explain why in the text, but power itself, so the expansion of power for the sake of power, it's not ideal, because the fullest extent of the expression of power would be imperialism. And the problem with imperialism is that every empire falls. Every great power eventually collapses. So, but Ascensionism is about continuous improvement. The Ascensionist needs to always seek greater magnificence and always go higher, always go up. We never, it's like Ascensionism is like a rocket ship that never stops going higher, right? So, we can't accept imperialism. We can't accept the pursuit of power because it eventually fails. And we need to be in alignment with causal forces. So we should not, try to break the laws of physics. We should work with the causal laws of reality. Now, here are some other aspects, other truths that Ascensionism covers. So I think that the consciousness is inherently restless. So conscious life is inherently dissatisfied and cannot be pacified and cannot be satiated. So a static utopia should not be recommended, because misery, desire, and action will always reappear. So the problem with a utopia is that the desire for conscious beings to engage in warfare will reemerge. The will to power will reemerge, you could say. And so the idea that you can comfort people with a bureaucracy, with democracy, or with like a secular government, this is simply a delusion. So superabundance can satiate the consciousness, not fully though. It could be a foundation for um, greater mobility, but it is not the final destination. And so, obviously, the Ascensionist doctrine is hierarchical. Hierarchy is an axiom of reality, and so our doctrine is inherently anti-egalitarian. And once again, this entire slideshow was generated by ChatGPT, so it's actually complete goy slop. I mean, this is just not very. It's not a very good slideshow to be out. But anyways, we work with what we got. So the doctrine is explicitly anti-egalitarian. It treats superior and inferior forms as real, not imaginary. Elevatum stands above social leveling. Now, I want to point out that I do not support any form of discrimination because I don't want this video taken down by the community guidelines. So, anyways, so most worldviews will have the dichotomy between good and evil. So when you do what is right, you're doing good. When you're doing what is wrong, you're doing evil. But I think that's the wrong dichotomy. I think the right dichotomy is up versus down. You want to be higher. You want to be a higher form of being. You want to go up instead of down. That is the correct moral continuum rather than good versus evil. What matters most is whether a force elevates, freezes, or degrades life. This shift is meant to prevent a fixed, static idea of the good from becoming a final cage. So even morality itself can just be slave morality. Even morality can just constrain your possibilities and make you into a corpse. So now I'm critiquing certain aspects of society. So the problem with all societies are ultimately bureaucratic because a bureaucracy is an administrative system and they're often parasitic. I mean, the fact that that governments will steal your money and then call it taxation, that is a parasitic activity. And so bureaucracies are parasitic, they are spiritually flattening, they are self-preserving, and they are a system that rewards conformity and mediocrity and comfort over magnificence. Now, this is actually something that I think Nietzsche identified correctly, is that he was very suspicious of values that could appeal to the masses, because once something is touched by the masses, Nietzsche thought that it was disgusting, it was inferior, it was gross, right? I think he was right in this instinct, in that now we with in a democratic civilization, everyone is reduced to a mediocre, lifeless robots who will just follow procedures. And why do you follow procedures? To follow procedures. And you follow procedures to expand the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy tells you to follow the procedures. And then the bureaucracy will spread like a parasite and extract your resources. They will extract your creative potential until you become a hollow husk. Now, this cannot do, of course. So we need to be against static ideals. We need to be against paradise. So whether it's a political utopia or a religious paradise like heaven, or right? So final resting places are dangerous because they can turn your energy into fixed obedience and stagnation. And you have to understand that bureaucracies, so all governments and all official positions of power, are ultimately co-opted by the shadow elites, who are hidden Luciferian networks that engage in satanic rituals. And basically, because psychopaths break rules, and because the ability to break rules is how you obtain power, psychopaths will always control the material world. So what Ascensionism seeks in the world is that we need to. Okay, so yeah, these are certain practical goals that can be aimed at. I'm not saying they're possible. I'm not saying that these you can actually achieve these things. These are just ideals. So look, we need to abolish parasitism, abolish taxation, abolish fractional reserve banking. So taxation is theft, and a fractional reserve banking, like central banking, it is actually the same thing as taxation, except you pay the cost through inflation rather than just having your money stolen directly. So superabundance is something you want to achieve, because the problem with scarcity is that you fall into the Malthusian trap. So if the resources are scarce, then that means human conflict is inevitable, and that means the creative energies are distracted and unable to achieve greater magnificence. But superabundance is not the final goal. Superabundance is the foundation to further possibility. And we need to reject all final utopias. we need to reject um, any idea that there's a correct final state of mind or that there is a correct state of being. All state of beings are meant to be transcended. Everything is a stepping stone for something greater, not a final resting place, not a finish line. So yeah, every finished system risks becoming another form of stagnation. And so yeah, there's no guarantee that ascensionism as a movement will succeed. Um, yeah, and so that's why I want people to form their own sects of ascensionism. I want the ascensionist movement to be a free market of ideas. There's no there's no definition of ascensionism that can be reduced to language, because language is itself a system of circular validation that has no meaning. It's just meant to point at something that your intuition can uncover. So you don't want to I don't want to be dogmatic and say this is what ascensionism is, blah blah blah, this is what it means to ascend. This It is up to the correct intuition to discern. You need to develop the correct ascensionary intuition to be a good ascensionist. And I go over this in my text on Substack, but this slideshow presentation is merely illustrative. It's not very substantive. So this is what ChatGPT thinks are the best starting paths. I don't necessarily agree, but anyways. So that is a very short illustration of what ascensionism is, but it's very incomplete actually. I recommend people actually reading the documents themselves, because I'm not a very good speaker, and I think people should have their own interpretations of the text. And basically, the point of this religion, this new religion that I'm founding, is that um, we need to be beyond history. The problem with being within history, being within existence, is that we have constantly been in a cycle of rise and fall. We have constantly, every civilization, including this one, will eventually collapse. So how do you transcend existence itself? How do you be greater than the existential inevitability of failure? I don't think there's a solution to this problem, but I hope Ascensionism can at least be the best option available. Anyways, hopefully you become an Ascensionist. And with that being said, elevate them.